How to cover a cake with fondant neatly with sharp edges. So today I'm going to be showing you just how you're going to cover a round cake precisely with fondant. So this cake has been trimmed and crumb coated, as you can see. So you might say, what am I applying over this? I'm applying sugar syrup. Now after crumb coating a cake with fondant, to some most times the buttercream used in crumb coating dries off, and if you're going to be applying fondant over it, you definitely know that fondant needs to adhere, that needs to stick to your the buttercream. So if your fondant, the buttercream applied on your cake for crumb coating is dried off, your fondant won't hold. So I precisely always apply sugar syrup to my cakes. It helps to hold the fondant together. So after doing that, the next thing you need to do is you need to measure the diameter of the cake, that's the top of the cake, using a tape. You can use a ruler if you have, but I'm measuring using a tape, and measurement will be in inches. Also determine the height of the cake and leave an excess point. As you can see, I left an excess point of 6, making it 6 inch. The next thing is that you want to take the overall circumference, that's the of your cake diameter too. The diameter of the cake, I see around. I'm placing my tape around and leaving excess. As you can see, you shouldn't take the exact, there should be an excess because we're going to cut that off. So now the first thing I'm going to do is I pre-made my fondant ahead of time. So I'm going to pull out my fondant now from my Ziploc pack. If you don't, you mustn't actually keep your fondant wrapped in a Ziploc bag. You can keep it in a nylon and tie it up. So I have a Ziploc bag I usually have, and I place my fondant ahead of time. So now I'm just going to knead my fondant. Knead it, because most of the times when you wrap and keep, it might harden up a bit, so you need to re-knead your fondant to make it pliable, so that when you're rolling it out, you have a wonderful, you won't stress you out, the rolling will come out well. So I'm going to portion this into two. One part is going to be used for the body of my cake, that's the larger lump. You can see I'm placing in my Ziploc bag, and I'm going to just seal it up and keep it by a corner. The essence of this is you don't want your fondant to dry up, so don't leave it exposed to the air. So the first part, which I have in my hand, I'm just going to fold it in like a ball. Now I'm going to be applying this part on the top of my cake. As you can see, for the top, I'll roll it out and layer it on the top of my cake first. So now I'm going to roll this out. Now during the rolling process, which I will show, you will see, it's very important that you don't roll out your fondant too thin. Don't roll out the fondant too thin. It should be of a good thickness. It should have good thickness. This is because that's when it's time to cover the cake, if it's so thin, while trying to achieve the sharp edge effect, it might tear off, or it might begin to show the cake itself out through the fondant. So it's very important that when rolling out the fondant, it should be of good thickness. So I'm just sprinkling icing sugar on my smoother, and I'm going to smoothen it out because I'm done rolling out. So the next thing now I'm going to do is I'm going to get my measuring tape, which I will be using to determine the diameter of the fondant rolled out. You want to ensure that when you roll out your fondant, the diameter is more than that of the cake itself. At the beginning, you saw when I was taking the measurement of the cake top itself. So you want to ensure that when you are rolling out your fondant all round, the top base fondant which is rolled out must exceed that of the measurement taken for the top of your cake. So I'm now going to apply this. The next thing I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to cut off the excess fondant off. I'm not cutting it off so much. I still need to leave out excess fondant from the top, at the top a little bit. So I'm taking off the part that is so much far from the top of my fondant. So now I dusted my under cake board with icing sugar. It is a must you do this, please, either icing sugar or corn flour, because when we start the process of smoothing and all that, when it's time to flip back up, if you don't have icing sugar, it might stick, and when you're trying to remove it, the board from that part of the cake, it might end up pulling up and spoiling your fondant. So do endeavor to dust with icing sugar. So as you can see, I flipped my cake over. Now the next thing is to measure the cake from the paste, just from where the fondant is. You can see from that part, you can see from the bottom to the top, and you want to ensure that you leave excess too. As you can see, I'm leaving an excess of making this up to 6 inches high. The next thing now is to take the overall diameter of the cake, because we're going, you remember the other fondant part that I kept, that's going to be used for the body of the cake. So you also need to take measurement of that, as you can see, which I have done. So I push the cake aside now. Now I'm going to be working on rolling out the fondant for the body of the cake. So you want to ensure your table is neat, no bread, no cake crumbs and of any sort. Dust either corn flour or icing sugar on your work surface. So this is the fondant I had left out before, and I'm going to roll this. I'm going to knead this first, then I'm going to roll it out into something like a big sausage roll, after which I'm going to sprinkle icing sugar over my board and over the fondant paste, and also my rolling pin I'm going to dust with icing sugar. So I'm going to pick up my rolling pin now, and I'm going to roll out my fondant vertically and horizontally. The essence of this is because you recall I too had to take measurement of the overall circumference, that's around the cake, measurement of the cake. So I need to know how long the fondant is so it can wrap around the cake, and also vertically, that's to meet up the height of the cake. Recall I said we're going to be taking for this particular cake, I gave it an excess, making it up to 6-inch height for the fondant height, rolled height. So I'm going to be working that now. So you're going to see how I'm going to roll this out, cut this to meet up the measurement taken. Okay, so Now using my pizza cutter, I'm going to cut just one part of the fondant, that's at the base, and then I'm going to cut the other end of both edge. Now if you observe, I took measurement of the length of the fondant and the height, and I left excesses. Taking the length, from that, as you can see, the height is 6 inches with, as earlier stated, and taking the length, as you can see, it is in excess. So that done now, I'm just going to try to smoothen it out. When carrying out the smoothing process, don't try to drag, because as you're dragging, you are stretching out the fondant, which can lead it to make it prone to tearing. And as I earlier said, the fondant has to have a good thickness. So I'm going to tie down the excess fondant I have, as it's very important whenever you're working, when you have excesses, don't just leave your excess fondant on the table because it can dry out. You have to always wrap it up in a leather or keep it in a container. So I'm going to pick up my small rolling pin, or the rolling pin, but I prefer using the small rolling pin, and I'm going to wrap my fondant over, as you can see. So as seen, next I'm going to take up my fondant and I'm going to apply it around the cake. Now if you remember, I told you that I applied sugar syrup around the cake, so that's what is actually going to help to hold the fondant to the cake. And when applying the fondant, do know that I'm ensuring that the excess also comes out at the base of the cake. So I hope you can see the way I applied it. So you can see the excess. It gets to a point whereby they overlap. Can you see that? So I'm going to get a suya stick. You can use a ruler if you have, to ensure that I take a straight cut, because I want to remove that excess and finally join both fondants together. So I'm using my X-Acto knife. If you don't have an X-Acto knife, you can use your a small kitchen knife that is actually sharp, and cut straight down, as you can see, to the base of the board. So I'm going to peel off that excess. Now you want to ensure that the cut is deep so that you can easily bring out the excess overlapping in. So you can see the excess. I've peeled it off, so I'm going to close. So you see it is now going to flush in very well. So the top, I'm just going to fold it a bit. I will still cut that part out, but for now the focus is to ensure that the fondant adheres to the body of the cake. So I'm now going to start smoothing my cake, upward and downward motion. Now you recall, as you can see now, as you see the base, there was an excess at the top one for the top of the cake and that of the body. So now I'm going to be applying pressure in such a way that I'm trying to merge together the side and the top of the fondant down, like pressing it together so that they've merged together. Then I smoothen the body of the cake. So I'm going to do that now. It's just like, imagine having two soft like fondant, you bringing them together and pressing them together so that it becomes one. So that's what I'm just doing here. I'm pressing, I'm smoothing, applying force, I'm pressing it down to the base of the fondant. So see how I go about doing that. So let me show you now. Let me bring you a closer look. As you can see what I'm doing. Gradually round. Now I'm smoothing the body because I need everything to flush in well. So I'm just going to cut off the excess at the top before we continue smoothing the body and trying to ensure everything. So I'm actually just going to be smoothing that out. So you remember there's a joining point. I'm going to smoothen that out so that it flushes in. At times that joining point is still going to be visible, but the way to it is you can use royal icing to seal up the joint if you won't be covering it up with some form of decorative paste. So you can just use royal icing to do that. So I'm going to use my X-Acto knife. I'm going to use my X-Acto knife now to cut off the excess at the border, as you can see. So I'm now going to do like a final smoothing, whereby I'm going to be applying pressure from the side of the cake, downwards. So you can see there are little excesses coming off. So I'm going to do that, smooth around the cake, and use my X-Acto knife to remove that excess. As you can see, it's all smooth now. So I'm going to use water. I'm going to apply to the edge around the fondant, not the cake. Not the cake. You don't want water to touch the cake. I'm going to apply the water at the edge of the fondant from the top. So the reason I'm doing this is because I'm going to be applying my board, and I want my cake to stay on the board, meaning it doesn't slide off, maybe during transportation or something like that. Even though on the board itself, I applied butter cream. So the next thing is that now I'm going to place my board. Now the board, before placing my board, I had butter cream at the base. So I'm pressing it down so it stays well, as you can see. And ensure that it is properly centered, because once you flip over, you won't be doing any kind of movement. So I'm going to flip over so you can see. Can you see? It was easy for me to pull off the board because I applied icing. So can you see how clean it is? I'm just going to clean around the board now. And here we go. So I'll just dust off the excess icing sugar that was on the top of the cake. But before I do that, I quickly smoothing around the cake. And I dust off excess icing powder, the sugar out of the board everywhere. And here we go, clean up the edge of the board because I'm done covering my cake. So as you can see, this is how you to cover a cake, just a round cake, to get sharp edge. You can see how easy it is. Maybe that the video is quite long. Yes, that's because I took out my time to ensure I show you guys step by step how it is done. No magic. It's once you follow this process, you are certain to achieve such clean covering of your cake with fondant. So I'm just doing a smooth. I'm just going to be smoothing out the body of the cake so that everything is just smoothing up. So I'm done, as you can see, clean and neat. So at this point, I did like to apply some paste around the board of my cake. So all you need to do is you get your fondant, you roll it out to a desired length, and then on the board I applied sugar syrup so that my fondant can adhere to the board. You can use sugar syrup or water, but I just use sugar syrup, and I'm now going to use my smoother to apply pressure so it sticks to my board. I'm going to do that all around. Next, I'm going to use my X-Acto knife to cut off the excess fondant from the fondant paste I used to cover my board. So you can see how I'm doing it. So there are actually two methods to this. You can cover your entire board with fondant before placing it over the cake and doing the flipping up. But sometimes it could get messy. So this is just the best way I do it. And you want to ensure that your joining point rhymes with the joining point of the body of the cake itself. So that's it. That's just the final smoothing up of the body of the cake, and here we go. A neatly clean, a neatly covered cake. So I hope you understood this session.